Good. Well, welcome to the Leadership Lounge. It's great to have you join us today. I've got three more guests joining me. I've got Ivor D'Souza, who's a leadership coach and managing director of D'Souza Development Consultants. I have Julia Humphrey, who's the head teacher at Garbaldersham C of E Primary School, and Megan Warnock, who's a teaching assistant at Guildhall Feffment Community Primary School. So great to have you with us here today, guys. Thank you for joining us. So Ivor, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what your work entails.
Yeah, so I'm Ivor D'Souza. I'm a leadership coach who works with leaders predominantly in the education sector and supporting them to bring back changes from the challenges of leadership. Previously to that, I worked in education as a teacher, as a school leader, as a head teacher as well.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Ivor. We've got to know each other a number of years, haven't we? And have shared the same journey of being a head teacher and now working in coaching. So it's great to have you with us and bring that perspective. Julia, I've known you also for a number of years. You are too a head teacher at Garbaldersham. So tell us a little bit about that and your journey and what your day sort of normally involves.
So, hello, yes, Julia Humphrey. I'm currently an interim head teacher at Garbaldersham Primary School. So for the last year, I've been on a secondment. I normally work for a large trust, and they've loaned me out this year to go and work with a school that's had some tricky things to deal with this year. So it's been a very interesting year to date.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Julia, amongst your busyness of being an interim head and coming in and trying to help that school through to even better things. So thank you for joining us. And Megan, thank you for joining us too. You're going to bring a perspective to today, because I know the topic we're going to look at, again, is something that I've got to know that you're very strong at too. But tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a teaching assistant at Guildhall Feffment Primary. I currently work in Year 5, but since working at the school, I've been in all year groups, I think. And yeah, so every morning I assist children and do interventions with children. And then I teach 3 afternoons a week as well, which is really cool. Great,
fantastic. And thank you for joining us again today. So those of you who are listening might think, well, there seems to be a bit of an education theme today. You know, if you listen to the Leadership Lounge before, we have people from a range of backgrounds. But our topic today is not just around education. This month, we're going to be looking at the topic of personal and interpersonal courage. So just because the guests happen to have experience of working in education, this is not just about education. So we're going to be looking at courage, and courage is a word that quite often evokes knights and superheroes, but courage is not for the elite or the bold warrior. Personal courage is about doing the right thing when no one is looking. It's about integrity. And personal courage is about moving from the comfort zone into your golden zone and then into the stretch zone. It's about doing things that you find perhaps a little bit uncomfortable, and sometimes it's stepping forward into something new. Sometimes it's about holding back. Sometimes it's not telling someone what you really think. Maybe it's that bit of courage sometimes as well, and just holding back on yourself. And courage, as the author and speaker Brené Brown puts it, has an inexplicable dance also with vulnerability. To be courageous, we need to step into vulnerability, to take a risk. To step into vulnerability, we need courage. And I love that explanation. It helps us understand it isn't just for the superheroes, it's for the everyday person. So in this podcast, we're going to seek to help leaders explore what personal courage is. How do we do the right thing? How we take on the challenge? And we'll examine interpersonal courage too, how we are courageous in our relationships with those that we lead, how we seek to develop people, to add challenge to our relationships in leading people. So here we are with our 3 guests. Thank you for joining me, as we say. Let's explore then, first of all, this personal courage. What are the ways that as leaders we have to have personal courage? So Julia, I wonder if I could start with you. Personal courage, what are the ways that we have to show that?
So I think personal courage is about how you show yourself to people. So it's about being that positive example to people around you. So trying to be positive in your outlook, positive in your desire to seek solutions out to situations, because, you know, every day things are thrown at us that are not easy to manage. So it's about being positive in those situations. And I think it's about showing those people that you're working with around you that it is okay if the actions don't work out, that they have permission to try things out, to be innovative perhaps, to seek out a solution. And even if that solution is not what you had perhaps intended it to be, to learn from that situation, to talk it through with people that you trust. So to me, as a leader, it's about modelling that and encouraging other people to be able to follow that example. And I think that can be really powerful. One of the phrases I often remember is that courageous leadership is contagious. So I think if they see you being courageous in your leadership, it can develop that culture. So for me in a school, it can develop a culture within the staff that I'm working with to put themselves out there, show commitment, try things out and not feel afraid that the consequences might end up with them with a slapped wrist or something.
Yeah, and I love that phrase you've given us. Courageous is contagious. That's a lovely ring to it. But what you're talking about being contagious is comes back exactly to what Brené Brown talks about, that vulnerability, doesn't it? That ability as leaders to start that vulnerability loop, to be open and honest about things, to step into it and model that to other people. I think that's a brilliant example, and I love that. We've almost perhaps got the top tip straight away at the beginning of our session today. So thank you, Julia. Ivor, what about you? Does any of that resonate with you? Are different examples for you around personal courage?
Yeah, absolutely. That really resonates with me. I also think as well, sort of standing up for what you believe to be right, and taking a lead in the face of adversity takes real courage. It's sometimes easier to maybe allow ourselves to be led by others, to maybe sort of to run away from the issue, avoid the issue. So actually standing up for the issue, doing what you believe is the right thing to do as a leader takes real courage. I think one other point, with leadership, a key role of a leader is to bring about change. Now, there was a philosopher called Schopenhauer who talked about the 3 stages of change. And the first stage talked about is change will be ridiculed. The second stage is that it will be violently opposed. And then the third stage is actually it's accepted and self-evident. And I think to lead through those first 2 stages takes great courage as a leader.
Yeah. And a perfect example there. And that personal courage to step into those moments, knowing, any leader that's done it once or twice will know that you do get that ridicule, don't you? And you do get that pushback, and that in some ways makes that courage even harder, isn't it? You know what's coming. Okay, I'm going to get some ridicule, I'm going to get some pushback, but I need to still have the courage to go through those 2 bits to get to the third. Brilliant reminder for us. Thank you, Ivor. What about you, Megan? Has it been about the ridicule? Has it been about the pushback? Has it been about the vulnerability? What's personal courage for you?
I think within my role, I don't perhaps have as many big decisions to make, and I don't really enforce change in the same ways that perhaps you might, Julia, because I'm not, right there at the top making those big decisions. But I think having the courage to stick by your intentions and stick by the things that you are going to live out and carry out, I think is really important. And I think sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves for people to see us doing it perfectly all the time. And I don't think that's realistic. And I think it takes a lot of courage to show that we're not perfect and we don't get it right all the time. But we have good intentions, and we make mistakes and things don't always run smoothly, but that's okay. We're human with that. So I think that's quite a courageous thing to do.
Yeah, and I think you've got 2 really important things there, isn't it? It's that openness and honesty again, to be real, to be human as leaders. And you say whatever strata we might put on leadership, actually it starts, doesn't it, about leading ourselves, that ability to acknowledge who we are and we make mistakes, but that importance also to hold on to what we believe in, and that courage I think is really important, Meg. And it starts with leading ourselves on that, isn't it? If these are the values that we live by, if this is the integrity that we hold on to, then it's important we start with that first. Because if we can't do that for ourselves, we've got no hope of leading others, is it? Whether that's in a class of children, whether that's as a head teacher of a school of adults and children, or whether that's anyone from business or charities or whatever it might be, that starts with that personal courage to hold on to the values values which you believe. So, yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So 3 cracking starts from my guest there. So how important, though, is personal courage as a leader? I'm not necessarily asking you to kind of rank it in terms of, is it number 1 in the charts or wherever it might be, but how important is it? So, Julia, where would you put this? How important is it for us to have this personal courage?
I think it is really important. I think it needs to be that thing that is quietly sitting within you. Thinking about leaders that I've worked with and courageous leaders, one of the things that I was going to speak about today is, as you said at the beginning, it's not, being courageous, that whole idea of superheroes. It's not about the roaring loudly all the time. It's not about being right in the front all the time. Sometimes the best leaders that I've worked with have been those quiet, efficient people that, as Meg said, have really held on to the true purpose of what they need to be working with, and just got on with that day after day after day. Absolutely. Even, despite the setbacks in a day, or not maybe always seeing, fruits from their labour every single day. It might be the fact that they have to think, right, I need to pick that back up again tomorrow and work with it. So it's about people, having that true sense of purpose and holding that really tightly within, because often leadership is a long game, isn't it? It is not that you're going to resolve the issues and sort that change out by tomorrow or by the end of today. People need to think about being patient, about maybe their part in the leadership process. Maybe somebody is going to come in and do a piece of work and then pass it on to the next person. So I think that's where courageous leadership could be, not being the person who wants to be roaring at the front, be the person that everybody gives the glory to. It can be just about getting on with things really steadily so that, you can set things in motion for maybe the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there can be a real false view of leadership, that it is always about the person at the front. And you're totally right. Again, for me, the best leaders I've worked with are those that just been consistently and calmly getting on with it and just modeling it. And for anyone listening, that is what has impact. It's the person that holds tight to those things and keep doing it. And therefore, the importance of it is great, because actually it comes back to your quote at the beginning. What was it? Courage is courageous, wasn't it?
Yes. Contagious.
That's it. Yeah, I can get your quote wrong. It is contagious, and people see that, model that, follow that. Ivor, what is it for you? How important is personal courage?
Absolutely fundamental. As I said before, I feel to lead through, to stand up and lead through adverse times, through times of adversity, is a tough thing to do. To bring about change is a tough thing to do. Leadership can be a lonely place at times. However, so that having that courage to press on regardless is essential. And so, yeah, it's a fundamental quality, I feel. Yeah.
So for you, is it one of the foundation stones almost of being a leader? It's one of the first blocks that has to go in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with what Julia was saying in terms of it's not the superhero leader. It's not, you don't have to be a loud leader. It's having that courage to lead. And it doesn't have to be in a loud way, but getting that across, as Julia said, is so contagious to your team.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've got 2 thumbs up for it being really important. Meg, what about you? Do you give it a thumbs up? Is it crucial? Is it a key element?
Yeah, I'll make it a hat trick. Definitely, I think it's so important. I think there's one of my favourite quotes is that confidence is silent and insecurities are loud. And often the people that are most insecure have to compensate and do things to kind of cover that up. And if you're in a leadership role and you measure your worth and you measure your value by how everyone else responds to your decisions, you're always going to be discouraged, because as much as you will try to make the best, or, you will make the best decision, not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone's going to be on the same page. You're never going to have unanimous harmony and agreement across the board. And I think you have to have that confidence in yourself, and you have to measure it by your own standards rather than what everyone else is feeding back. Otherwise, you'll always just feel like you're getting it wrong, or you'll feel discouraged from that. So yeah.
I love that principle you've just talked about there. Not not basing your decisions on the response you're going to get back. I mean, a beautiful reminder, those of us chatting here, I know have had those sort of moments where we just get the kit back, isn't it? And as you've just described, Meg, if you're judging it on, whether it's because you're not playing it, it's not like Britain's Got Talent, is it? And how many will give you the thumbs up or the positive buzzer, is it? And so if you judge it on that, you're struggling. So that sense to hold on to what you believe is right and to keep pushing at that is absolutely crucial. Brilliant. So what helps us then to be courageous? So we've all said, Meg said, it's a hat trick. Yeah, I'll give it the thumbs up too. It's really important to have this personal courage as leaders. So what actually helps us to be courageous? Because let's be honest, if you're stepping into vulnerability linked to that courage, it can be scary sometimes. It can be, oh, bum, this is going to be hard work. So what helps us actually to do that? Anyone?
I think having that, just like Meg said, it's about, you've got to be true to yourself. You've got to know what your values are. You've also got to know what your purpose is, what you're striving to achieve. Yeah. I think if you've got that sense of purpose, you've got that sense of who you are, then actually that can give you the courage to press forward.
Yeah, absolutely. My work as a coach, the first kind of couple of sessions I spend just working with people around purpose. I do an activity called Top Trump, where we just keep pressing and going deeper into your why, what drives you. And then we look at what your values are. And it's the difference that can make to leaders when they've got a clear, so this is my purpose then. It's to inspire and equip people. And these are my values. It's authenticity and integrity. If you only doubt what mine are, I've just revealed them all to you live on Leadership Lounge. But when you know what that is, it keeps you going, doesn't it? Yeah. Anyone else? What helps us? So knowing purpose, knowing your values, says Ivor, that's really key. And any other thoughts? What helps us to be courageous?
I think a support network is really crucial. When you are in a position where you might have to make a difficult decision or step out and be a bit vulnerable in your role. For me, something that's massively fueled my courage is going and finding members of staff who are a lot more experienced than me, or my line manager, or staff who I'm really close with, and saying, this is the decision I've come to, this is what I want to put forward. Do you think that, I followed this procedure? Do you think there's anything else I need to put in? And knowing there's a team of people that have my back and will, correct me or encourage me and tell me where I'm making the right decisions, and go, yeah, go for it. That's how I'd manage that situation. Go for it, go do it. So that as I'm, doing that and managing that situation, I know I've got that support and I've done the right thing.
Yeah, no, and I love what you've talked about there. That you said you went to people who had your back, but as you then described it, they did question, they did push back, they allowed you. It's almost like you're testing this in a little mini furnace. Someone you know is for you. You test it out, and that gives you more courage then to step into the real fire, if you like, because you put it under a little bit of pressure. So, yeah, Julia, I see you nodding there. Is that something you would agree with? Is there something you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and what you spoke about, Ivor, about that sense of purpose, and it's about your personal values. When you're working in a school, it's also about thinking about what the school values may well be, what your strapline for the school is, because that's a sort of very public-facing side of the school, isn't it? And, hopefully you know that you feel fulfilled in a role when your school role aligns and your personal values align with what the school is aiming to achieve in the longer term. But a little bit about what you were saying, Meg, also it's about reflecting, knowing yourself well enough that you can reflect on situations. So just before you're going into a meeting or just before you're about to head into something that you know is going to be a challenge, it's about reminding yourself of previous, times when you've been in that place and those natural nerves that you get, because we all do. None of us necessarily feel comfortable about any difficult conversations, for example, but drawing strength from remembering how previous conversations have gone, or, seeing how it has benefited somebody or the situation, and drawing strength from that. And equally, if it hasn't gone well, you've reflected on that as well, and you're not going to go and make that same mistake again.
Yeah. So I love blending that there, Julia, that this sense of just thinking, when have I been here before? When have I had to show courage? How did that go? What worked well? What didn't? What did I learn from last time? Actually, is this similar? I could take that element into this again. And it's just reminding yourself, if we're painting this, ourselves as the hero here, stepping into an unknown part of the next part of the quest, which have I fought a monster like this before? What did it look like? How did it go? What did I learn there? Again, a really brilliant brilliant reminder can give us that courage. So one of the areas around us for courage is showing integrity and doing the right thing even when no one is looking. It's crucial for our reputation as leaders. All we've got to do is open the paper or open our iPad and see the news to see the number of times leaders get caught out when they don't show integrity. And even sometimes even if we look and think, when is this person going to get caught out for their lack of integrity? It does come in the end. So what helps us in these moments to have the courage to show integrity? Because normally when integrity is being tested, and we have to take that personal courage to do the right thing, there normally is a pull on something. There's something almost like the Tom and Jerry, if you remember that, he gets banged on the head and you got the little angel Tom and the little, no, it was Jerry, wasn't it? Little angel Jerry and the little devil Jerry going, do this, no, don't do this. We've normally got that tension. So what helps us to show that courage in those moments? Anyone got any thoughts?
I think, again, it comes back to the values. Knowing what you stand for and what you're trying to achieve, and actually spotting those. If you're very self-aware, you know what your values are, then you'll spot when you're maybe a situation is causing you to stray away from those, and it's actually writing that quickly. So I think sometimes we can sleepwalk through situations. So actually being very, very aware of who we are, what we stand for, can really help us. Will really help us. And then taking time, like Meg was saying, to having people that you can go to talk to, taking time to talk to others. So if you're saying, okay, this is a situation, what do you think we should do? How about if I do it like this? So getting that feedback from people is so important.
Yeah. I use a phrase, if in doubt, check it out. And then you feel this, I call it also the rub. When you've got stuff that's going against your values, you just think, hang on, there's a rub here. It doesn't feel comfortable. It feels a bit of friction. But you're right, Ivor. Sometimes these things sneak up quietly. We almost sleepwalk into it, don't we? But as soon as we recognize, hang on, this doesn't feel smooth. This feels like a rub to me. If in doubt, check it out. Spend some time thinking it through. And as you and Meg have said, just refer that back to maybe, your board, people you put around you that will help you in those moments and to reflect. Anyone else got any thoughts on that one? How we hold on to integrity, how with the courage to do that?
I think it's about...
Yeah, go on, Julia. Megan can speak in a moment. That's the beauty of us holding our kind of chat here in the Leadership Lounge. We will sometimes chip in on each other. That's fine. So, Julia, you go first, and then Megan can share some thoughts.
I think, as we've said, it's about being true to yourself, and it's about having that peace within. When you enter that conversation, or when you come out of that conversation, that you have that sense of, yeah, okay, that wasn't comfortable, but I know I've done the right thing nonetheless. And as leaders, I know none of us would say that we necessarily always get a good night's sleep, but it is about, going to bed at night, putting your head on the pillow and thinking, yeah, I did the right thing today and I do feel at peace with it. And that's not always the case. And I think, as Ivor said, it's about recognizing that, we will make mistakes and that we will not go in the right direction sometimes, that we should have gone with something, and feeling that rub, recognizing that rub, and then going back and doing something about it. And that takes even more courage, because if you come out of a situation, then you have to try and go back and convene a conversation and speak with that person again, because that thing has not sat comfortably with you, but it's important that you do so. That needs an awful lot of courage.
Yeah, it does need courage. Interestingly, I've found in moments like that, you worry about, oh gosh, how am I going to look and all the rest of it. But you go and do those things. Often it has even more impact positively than you realize, because people go, oh yeah. And again, you've modeled that vulnerability that you were talking about earlier, Julia. You've modeled, actually, I've reflected, I'm being self-critical of myself here. I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that. And it's not that you're pointing the finger at them. You're just saying, for me, it's not felt. And you model that to others. So again, I can think that can be really powerful. Although we worry about it, it often can work to benefit and just models the culture we want, doesn't it? Meg, you were going to add some things as well.
Yeah, so I think integrity is such a massive part of character, and I think it's something that's fundamental to really good character. I think integrity is right up there. And I think when sort of struggling with making the right choice and having the courage to do that, I think it's really important to remember that all the small right choices that you make build up to people's overall perception of your character. And, you know, in the moment, choosing to stay 5 minutes later to sort something or write that down, even though you might not need to write it down, it then means that if something happens where people's integrity are questioned or people's character are questioned, you know that you've always lived up to a way where people can go, actually, that's not like them. And I don't think that's right. And it kind of gives you this support because you know that, people know your reputation, people know you. Because, you know, in schools, you know, children can say things or things can happen and then there's not a record of them. And if you've made all those conscious right choices out of integrity, I think people really value that and can see what character you are.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And it's what they see, isn't it? It's what builds trust as well. As you're often doing those little choices, as you say, it just keeps building trust with people. And then if something is presented to them that they think, hang on, that isn't that person, because they normally model all these same things. I think you're totally spot on. So earlier on, I talked about Brené Brown's link between courage and vulnerability. And Julia, you've mentioned a couple of examples of that. But how else have we experienced this relationship between vulnerability and courage? Because if we go around thinking that courage is just about stepping in boldly and not worrying about it at all, if you then face something you're really worried, you then start thinking, oh, well, I'm not courageous then. Whereas actually, I think Brené Brown's totally right. The two are linked. But how else have any of you experienced this relationship between vulnerability and courage?
I think pride can really get in the way of vulnerability. And I think the more you kind of play into your insecurities and pride, the harder it is to be courageous. As the youngest member of teaching staff in school, one of my kind of insecurities and prideful thoughts is, oh, well, if I can't do that, they'll think it's because I'm too young or I'm too inexperienced. And I really didn't want that to be, and that's not at all how they think, but for me, that was something that I believe people would think. And so I wasn't brave enough to be vulnerable and say, actually, I need more support with that, or actually I'm taking on too many roles and it means I'm struggling to be prepared for the afternoon lesson or something. And I've massively learned over the years that just being honest about where I need support or where I'm doing too much it's not at all negatively impacted me. People have had real respect for that. And if anything, they thought the opposite. They've gone, oh, that's really mature of you. So yeah, just I think really focus on what is the issue around this vulnerability? You know, where are my areas of pride? What is really stopping me from taking that courageous step?
That is a brilliant reminder. And the thought, yes, pride often does. I don't think it steals the vulnerability, does it? The vulnerability is still there. It just masks it, just covers it over, and it means we can't then address it. And you've given a brilliant example there, Meg, when you've actually stepped forward. You've recognised, oh, hang on, this is a bit of pride holding me back. Still step forward. Then you get the help and the support. So actually, pride is a real barrier to then getting what we need to support us through those courageous moments. Brilliant example. Anyone else got kind of another example or experience of that vulnerability and courage?
I've learned from people that I've worked with that have stepped into leadership roles and really, you know, taken from them the way that they have sometimes brought their struggles to me. And I found that something that has taught me many, many lessons, because probably in the past I was trying to be that superhero head teacher leader that was trying to be all things to all people and look like it was all perfect on the outside, even though there may be lots of struggles underneath. And I wasn't necessarily very open to sharing that with other people. But I've worked with some incredible people that stepped up into leadership over the years. Heads of schools and deputy heads, for example, so they're in really prominent positions. And when they've come to me and closed the door and said, you know, Julia, can we have a chat about some things? And they've been very wobbly and, you know, they talked really from the heart. That's given me a real sense of they trust me enough to be able to bring those difficult things to me, knowing that, as you said, Meg, they've built up enough about who they are for me then not to look at them and see any of that as a weakness, but to see that as an absolute strength. And then obviously we've talked through what it is that they need, but me reflecting on those conversations afterwards has made a big difference to the way that I then have been more willing to be more open with people.
Yeah. And this vulnerability is so key. If we want, it's a key to improvement of ourselves, but also improvement of the organisation. If we want this culture, as Matthew Syed calls it, of black box thinking, where we can have open and honest review, it has to be from a place where people feel safe to be open and honest. And safety comes from vulnerability, and vulnerability, again, as we said, is linked to courage. So we have to have the courage to step into that and model it. And as you say, when leaders model that, so actually, and you were talking about some fellow leaders modeling it to you, that then gives you the courage to then say, oh yeah, I can be like this, and I can be like this with them, and actually I can be like this with others. I need to model that too. And that vulnerability loop that it creates, I'll be vulnerable, it means, oh, so you can feel safe to be vulnerable. So absolutely crucial. Ivor, anything else to add from what's been said?
Yeah, I think sort of from me, personal perspective, in terms of, when I set up my coaching business, started from scratch, and that was, at the start of that journey, you're feeling fairly vulnerable. Is this going to work out? Am I going to be able to provide a great service for schools? And so you have those self-doubts, but it's actually having that courage to press forward. So I think any career changes, that it's sometimes easy to just stay doing what you're doing, but actually not necessarily the right thing to do. So it comes back to those values again.
Yeah. Being clear on that then gives you the courage to step into it, even though it's pretty scary when if you're making that career change. Now, it's interesting, was we've talked, a number of us have talked about that sometimes it doesn't go right, does it? We step into something and it doesn't go quite so well, or we make a decision that perhaps doesn't have the full integrity we would have held on to before, and we've had to go back and adjust it. So what happens then in those moments when perhaps we make those mistakes, when we, some people might phrase it, when we bottle it, when we don't show the bottle to take that stand? How do we work forward from those when we perhaps have made the mistake or the error? How do we make that manageable? How do we show courage in those moments? Julia, you've got a big grin on your face there, as if have you got something that you kind of, for those who are listening, you're going to have to watch the YouTube to see Julia's grin. It almost looked to me like a grin of recognition, but maybe you're just laughing at me. I don't know.
No, I know how many times I've bottled it, Colin. When I've sat there with good intentions before a conversation, and then in that moment, something about it hasn't felt right. Yeah. Now, sometimes I have seen that as being a blessing in disguise, in a sense, because I haven't shared something with somebody that I felt I had needed to at that time. And actually, what's happened is, moving forwards, I found another way into a conversation with that person, and it's been more fruitful in the longer term. So sometimes I think it is about just listening, isn't it, again, to that person and to your conversation, and really sensing whether the timing is right. The timing is crucial, because if people aren't in the right place to hear something that you need to talk to them about, then sometimes bottling it, for me, bottling it at that point and walking away and finding a new way into that conversation is what has to happen. Because if they're not going to be able to listen at that time, then actually you're not going to get what you need to get to.
Yeah, so the wisdom there is actually in the reflection. Is this the right moment? And actually, if we're taking the decision to pull back because actually the conversation or the driving forward is not the right time, then there's a wisdom in that. If we're not stepping into it because we're just worried, then maybe is the challenge, isn't it? So what about those moments when we haven't stepped into it because we were worried, or we just bottled the courage at that point? So it's not the one Julia's mentioned. There is a wisdom in that, isn't there, in that reflection? But sometimes we just go, I'm not doing it today. I feel too scared. And we turn into almost like Bungle or Rainbow, for those who are old enough listening to this, and we just become this fumbly leader. And then afterwards we feel awful. So how do we work forward from those moments?
I think understanding what it was that was stopping us. So understanding what the barriers were. I think taking time to calm our nerves, our emotions. I think as a leader, you manage your emotions are fundamental. Going back to what we said about integrity, If we don't manage our emotions well, we won't be able to act with integrity or do things that are out of character. So we've got to taking time to understand the emotion, what was stopping us, why we're feeling this, and then finding a way to move forward, move beyond this. So sometimes we trip up, sometimes maybe we make mistakes, but actually doesn't mean we can't get back up again and actually move forward positively. And I think that's the key to those moments. When you're in those moments, find a way, understand it, understand what was happening, understand what was stopping you making that decision, and move forward.
Yeah. And I think I'm minded just listening to you there of this sense that leadership is not a journey, is a journey, not a destination. And we sometimes just see each moment as a destination, a binary pass-fail moment. Oh, I failed that, therefore I'm a failure. Whereas actually it's about the long-term journey. Where am I taking? Okay, so this one I made a mistake, or this one I just pulled back and maybe I should have stepped in. And to see that, so what did I learn here? As you say, understand your drivers. What made me pull back then? What do I need to do differently then if I'm going to move forward now? And that reflection is really important. But what helps it underneath it, isn't it, is this sense that we're on a journey of leadership, not just this stop-start kind of moment to it. So how can we develop this muscle of personal courage? Because I think courage is a muscle. I don't think it's something you're born with or that person is naturally a courageous leader. I think it's something we can develop. It's something we can grow. So any thoughts have you learned to grow your muscles of personal courage? And if so, what's helped you grow?
Yeah, I think just owning what you feel and where you've gone wrong is really, it's really, really powerful. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. But once you reach that point of going, I was at fault, or that wasn't a good situation, once you've come to that place of acceptance, you almost then go, well, what's the worst that can happen? Because I've owned it. I understand it. And just talking to people about what went wrong, and just having those kind of, in a less professional capacity, having those conversations with colleagues and just saying, I just felt really rubbish about that, or I know that wasn't right, and just offloading and just saying it how it is, just, not trying to be this perfect professional. And obviously there's a space to do that. Obviously, you're not going to do that in front of, in front of children, or in front of, when you're having to put on that leadership role front. I think just remembering actually all your colleagues are also human, and just having those real conversations and going, do you know what, that was rubbish, but hey, let's move on. Honest and open review with yourself, and that space to do it is really important then to grow that muscle, and it comes back to, again, that sense of journey, doesn't it? Julia, Ivor, any further thoughts on how we grow this personal courage muscle?
I think it's something, Ivor's already spoken about it, but it's about not getting too comfortable in your situation. And I'm thinking both professionally and personally as well. It's about putting yourself out there at times and, experiencing new things that are not necessarily, I'm not saying we all need to be bungee jumping every weekend or anything like that. But, it's about putting yourself into those places where you do get that tummy knot feeling, and, you do remember and remind yourself about what it feels like to not be comfortable, because there are lots of leaders in positions and they've been there for years and years and years and years. And I think, although leadership never stands still, it's never, exactly the same year after year. I think developing that muscle through lots and lots of varied experiences where you do feel really uncomfortable. It's not your norm and it's maybe not your choice. But I think that can really, really benefit you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're picking up on some of the work that Steve Peters in his book Chimp Paradox talks about, that we have our emotional side, what he calls our chimp. And one of the things that helps the chimp is reminding yourself of when it's been okay before. So as you say, putting yourself in experiences that that allow you to just almost create some memories in the computer part of your brain, as he calls it, that you can draw upon. And I spoke earlier, didn't I, about moving from your comfort zone into your golden zone and then maybe into your stretch zone. And that's how you move into, doing things that you thought might be really difficult, is taking those little steps, stepping into that golden zone just outside your comfort zone, isn't it? So as you say, it might not be bungee jumping, but it might just be attaching a rope to you and then taking it off again. That was enough for me today. I've just stretched myself a little bit, and we find the equivalent of that in our leadership experiences, don't we? So yeah, if I know certainly when I started as a leader, to go into a room full of what I called big important people, was like, I found really daunting, and so it was a case of, well, I'll just speak to one person today then, who I know already. And that just helps, doesn't it? And creates a little experience that you can draw upon. So a brilliant reminder there of how we develop that muscle. So one of the other area for the podcast today is just this interpersonal courage. So that's stepping into a difficult conversation with someone. And Julia, you kind of touched on this earlier. And when we do that, often we risk rejection or an emotion. But to step into that space or that discussion, it could be difficult, but you just know that you need to have it because it's part of, at the risk of sounding like a film comment, for the greater good. It's important to do it for the proper greater good. And so you need to have it, even though it's going to become difficult. So what helps us do that? What helps us then step into this interpersonal courage? Anything that either we talked about earlier that's important in this as well, or anything new to add that helps us? Any thoughts on that?
I think, again, the values, going back to the values of the organisation, your own values. And also, again, sense of purpose, what we're trying to achieve. And then if there is someone who's maybe acting in a way that's not aligned to those values, aligned to what you're trying to achieve, then actually you can feel justified entering that conversation. So knowing, going back to those values, knowing what it is you want to achieve, and how you want to achieve it, why you want to achieve it, then that can really help.
Yeah. Again, it makes the purpose of this conversation clear. And I wonder also, as you're saying there about your values, actually, it's just reminding yourself about the way that you're going to do this as well, which should be driven by your values, isn't it? And actually, if you are like mine, one of mine's authenticity. So I'll do this authentically. So even if she might or he might react to what I'm saying, that actually, as long as I do this with authenticity and with honesty and with care, then actually it's okay. So that reminder of values, I think you're totally right, Ivor. I know it's when you think, it's values again. If anybody listens to this, the importance of knowing your values is absolutely crucial. Yeah. Any other thoughts on what helps us to have those difficult interpersonal courage conversations?
I think you might. Oh, sorry again.
Your turn.
Megan, you go first this time. Yeah.
Sorry. I think this might just be a different way of saying values, but I think intentions, which we touched on before, are just so important. And if you're aligning everything you're saying with good intentions, then you can't go too far wrong. Yeah. And again, like what I said earlier, people's reactions to your well-intentioned conversations, it's not a reflection of you and how they feel about you. It could well be where they're at in their own lives. And like Julia said, having that quiet, still confidence and this, I know this is right, and I know I'm doing this for, like you said, Colin, the greater good. Just builds you up in a really strong position before going into those conversations. Yeah,
totally right. Intention. And I was reminded as you were saying that about the phrase that good leaders lift people up and bad leaders push people down. So actually, if your intention is to lift them and the situation up to become something better, then again, that will give us courage to step into it. I know this is going to be difficult. I know they might argue back at me, or they might cry, or depending what the situation is, but my intention is to lift them up. My intention is to help them become better, feel better about it. Great reminder. Julia, your turn now. Did Meg take exactly the same idea of you, or have you got another helpful thought for us?
No, I was going to be talking about really about being clear about what you want to talk about with that person, and then not using that opportunity as a chance to beat them with a stick about all things, because you need to think about the one thing that is going to make a difference. They need to come away from that meeting with you being clear about that as well, because again, if we're not clear in our heads, and if we're not coming from that really value-driven sort of purpose of what we want to achieve, they can come out feeling a little confused about what that conversation was about, and then they just feel hurt and they don't understand why they feel hurt. So I think that's really crucial as well.
Yeah, and I love what you're talking about. You need to get clear first yourself, don't you, before you talk to them. Be clear in order to get others clear. And it's about being clear right at the start of the conversation why you're having this and what the purpose of it is, so there's that clarity. So then it's not about them, it's not personal, it's about the situation and the purpose that you want improved. So yeah, great reminder. So what sorts of situations do you think we need this interpersonal courage in? And what have you experienced, and what has helped you beyond what we've already talked about? So Julia, what sort of examples have you had to experience this courage in these kind of interpersonal situations?
Yes, I mean, loads of opportunities really, almost every day to practice this, I guess, because, in every day in the workplace, sometimes things need to be said just to help to steer that ship, that school in the direction that you want it to go in. And it could be, very, very small things when you've seen somebody behaving in a way that doesn't quite fit with the way that the school needs to be working, or you've heard things, or come across emails or messages, and it's sometimes just a quick conversation with somebody that's going to perhaps nip something in the bud, but it needs to be done anyway. So, and I think it comes back, as we've often said throughout this conversation, about acknowledging the daily struggles that you have also with people. And, when you step into a new role, when you step out of that comfort zone that you've been in, and you are struggling with things as well, it's about sharing that, not openly, gushingly sort of talking at length about how you are with things, but just finding a few people, as Meg has said, that you can talk those things through, and the role that you might find yourself in and how hard it has been for you as well. So, I mean, it happens in all ways, I think, almost on a daily basis for me in my role.
Yeah. And again, as I'm listening to you there, I was minded by Ivor, you recommended a brilliant podcast to me, which I'm now a huge advocate of, which is the High Performance Podcast by Jake Humphreys. And one of his interviews, he spoke to someone who came up with this phrase: do the best that you can with all that you have in the moment that you're in. And this was Johnny Wilkinson, great rugby player. And that just bringing what you can in those moments when you're interacting again is really, really, really important. Not to think you have to have it all sewn up. Just what have you got available to you at that moment is really key. Ivor, any other thoughts for you just on where you've experienced this interpersonal courage and what's helped you?
Yeah. There was a situation where a member of staff, when I was a head teacher, she just wasn't herself. She's a fantastic member of staff. And she'd been off for a little while, and she'd come back to working, and she just wasn't herself. And everyone had picked up she wasn't quite her normal self. We couldn't put her finger on what. And actually, having that conversation, it maybe felt it potentially could be a bit awkward. You may be thinking, okay, maybe I'm imagining this, but actually realizing, no, this is actually happening. Having that conversation, it was transformational, and it enabled me to understand where she was coming from. Also, her to understand that actually she's really valued and well thought of. And actually, and she hadn't done anything wrong, but it was just, you don't want to upset someone by, so that was holding me back, I guess, or maybe I've got this wrong. But actually having that was transformational for us as a school. She came back to being fantastic.
Yeah. So sometimes to step into that vulnerability of a difficult conversation because you care for someone, and because you care for them, you're worried about the impact that might have. But you've just used that word. It can be transformational when we step into that. Megan, anything for you that is around this vulnerability and interpersonal courage?
I hope this makes sense. I think in my role, I am often reminded that I'm a bit of a voice for children. And because I'm not, my leadership doesn't always mean standing in front and presenting. It means coming alongside a child and getting to know them perhaps on a little more personal level. I think when there is team meetings and team conversations about the progress of a child, for me to have the courage to speak up, it's really good for me to remember I am that child's voice and I give a perspective that other people won't always see because they're taking on a higher role and a more presentational role, if that makes sense, and they're presenting things to the child rather than sitting next to them. And I think, just remembering, actually, my voice does hold weight in these conversations, and I can sort of empathise and relate to the people I'm working with in a different way, and I can use that to my advantage. And not be arrogant about it, but to say, actually, I feel like I know this child quite well. And from personal experience, I think I can have that kind of more emotional, personal input that perhaps, a teacher or a head of year that doesn't always see them wouldn't necessarily get to see.
Yeah.
So that's quite a full example, but
no, I think that's really helpful because even if you apply this beyond an education or a classroom context, it's about understanding your perspective has value and has weight, and that, bringing something that maybe they've not seen. So you're talking about there because you're close working with a child or groups of children, you'll see it more from their perspective, and bringing that in is really important to the conversation, even though it might be difficult, even though it might be something that's hard to hear. I think that's really valuable. So yeah, thanks for that, Meg. Ivor, you mentioned earlier that your role, like mine, is to be that of a coach. Is there anything from the world of coaching that you think can help us strengthen this muscle of interpersonal courage in these moments?
Yeah, I don't think any prizes for guessing the first thing is the values and drivers. I think, as Colin was mentioning, as you mentioned, there was early on in the coaching relationship, often a really good activity is to explore the person's values and drivers. And it is so powerful. And it enables them to be really clear on what they stand for. So as Julia was saying, when you're having those conversations with people, by knowing your values and drivers, you can be really clear. And clarity is so vital for those conversations. The next thing really is actually helping them prepare for those conversations to get that clarity. So things like, what is the issue? Why is it the issue? And then going back to those values, going back to the core purpose. How do we tackle this situation? So really thinking through and planning it. When's the best place to do this? How's the best way to go about it? What to do if this happens? How will they respond to this? What this person responds best to? All of those sorts of thoughts and preparations that you can do in advance of having that meeting. So coaching can support with that. The leader can then go and feel fully prepared so they can be really clear and really confident when they're in that meeting. Yeah. And really present in that meeting, because that's when you're doing those meetings, the leader has to be totally present in the moment. And having that sort of clarity and that confidence going to that helps them with that. Yeah. And I think finally, another area that a coach can help with is after you've had those conversations, a coach can really be helpful to look into a coach to reflect back on how that went, what went well, any areas that could have been improved. Sometimes we're very good as leaders at spotting what we didn't do so well, but we're not always so good at actually giving ourselves a pat on the back and saying, actually, I did really well with that. But it's actually taking that time, taking that moment to reflect back on a job well done sometimes, and actually that can bolster us as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So some brilliant reminders there, Ira, of two key things: that ability to plan and look ahead and evaluate what could be coming up and to review that, and equally afterwards to review that effectively. And you've talked beautifully there about the importance of a coach. And now, obviously, you and I would say this because we're coaches, but for leaders, if you haven't got a coach, really seriously consider that. If you've not heard of what it is before, it's really just as Ivor's described, somebody to ask you some good questions to help you have open and honest planning and review. And you might be able to do that yourself. And for many of us, perhaps we can, but sometimes you just need somebody to ask you the questions that will probe a bit deeper and go a bit richer. So yeah, quick advert there for coaching. If you've not got one, get one. Julia's laughing her head off there. It's an unashamedly advert for the coach of this world. And I'm saying it not because I want money for Ivor or myself in our businesses, but because it is crucial to help you as leaders in what is incredibly challenging times at the moment, and just have space for open and honest reflection. So thank you for that reminder for us, Ivor. And there's two key things there. If you want to put names on it, Ivor's talked about that, planning beforehand. So there's a thing called pre-mortem. So you've had a post-mortem when something or somebody has died, what caused its death. But pre-mortem is helpful sometimes, is thinking through, particularly in interpersonal conversations, what could happen here and what could I do about it? And a lot of people will go into it and go, well, what could go wrong here? And they think of all the things that could go wrong. But the next important stage is, so how could I deal with that? Planning. If they respond this way, how could I respond? And again, bringing it back to what we've said, what Ivor said on a number of occasions, your purpose and your values, bring it back to that, because this is important. If they respond this way, how will I respond? And planning that beforehand. And then Ivor's also talked about that review afterwards, was what the Army call after action reviews. You know, when there's been a battle, what worked well, what didn't, what will we do different next time? And to have those as a key part in helping you plan those things. So thank you for that reminder for us, Ivor. Brilliant. Now, time has run away with us, as normally does on the Leadership Lounge. It's been great to meet with you guys and chat through this whole thing around interpersonal courage. And it's come for that time where we now will look at your top tips or hear your top tips for our listeners. So if there's nothing else they take away, you want them to take away this top item. So what would it be for you? Julia, we're going to start with you. The other two are relieved because they now think I've got a few more moments thinking time. And Julia, I'm just giving you a few moments while I talk. But what is your top tip for people around personal and interpersonal courage? Julia, your top tip is, drum roll.
So I think my top tip comes back to something that we spoke about right at the very beginning, and that is about remaining positive in those storms, just holding firm and showing those people around you that sort of calm, visible presence. You know, visibility is key, isn't it? So that you are facing them, facing the day, whatever that situation. Because I think by modelling that to people, rather than your Tigger leaders, you know, that are bouncy and some days and then down the next day, your Eeyore leaders, and they don't quite know what's coming along. Just giving that presence to everybody that you're working with, you know, because of that personal, that interpersonal courage that you've got within, that you can be positive, even though you've got stormy days, stormy weeks, stormy years, and just showing people that nothing is too big, that we can't work through it together. We can do this. We've just got to be steady about it.
Yeah, lovely. Some rich thinking there, Julia. Thank you. Ivor, what about yourself? What's your top tip?
Comes back to values again.
And know your values.
So know what you're striving to achieve and what you stand for, and allow these to be your compass. Don't be swayed by trying to keep everyone happy. By focusing on your purpose and your values, you'll have the confidence and the courage to move forward with integrity and without regret.
Yeah, brilliant. And if we had to sum that up in one word, Ivor's delivered to us throughout, it's know those values. Brilliant. Thank you. And Meg, what about you? What's your top tip?
Mine would be just to be honest from the get-go. As soon as you're in the role you're in, be honest about the things that you're really good at and the things you enjoy and your strengths, and use them and utilize them, but also be honest about the things that make you feel nervous, the things that you need more support with, so that every time you're put in a situation that requires courage, the people around you know your strengths and know where you might need a bit of extra support. And once you've been honest and it's all out there, you know, it's all out there, and you can't, you don't have to kind of cover up or compensate for anything, because you've already said where you stand. So be honest from the get-go.
Brilliant. And that honesty then means you surround yourself with those people that actually will support you through it. So some brilliant examples there as well. Thank you. Guys, thank you for being with me in the Leadership Lounge. It's been an absolute delight to have Meg and Julia and Ivor with me today, 3 good friends. So thank you for joining me and sharing your wisdom. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Leadership Lounge, and we look forward to you joining us again next month when we look at our next topic. But in the meantime, thank you to Meg, Julia and Ivor, and look forward to all of our listeners now perhaps exercising some of that personal courage as a result of what you've shared. So thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us.